Christmas morning glittered like something out of a dream I didn't belong to. The living room glowed gold from the fireplace, the smell of cinnamon and pine filling the air. Wrapping paper shimmered under the twinkle lights. Laughter bounced off the walls, and in the middle of it all stood my little sister Lydia, hair, curled red silk robe, eyes bright with expectation. Mom held up her phone to film while Dad, grinning like a showman, led her toward the front door. "Come on, sweetheart," he said, the kind of voice that meant something big was coming. The rest of us followed, shivering in our pajamas, as he threw open the door to reveal it, a silver Rolls-Royce, gleaming in the snow, a giant red bow stretched across the hood. Lydia screamed. The neighbors clapped from their porches. Dad puffed his chest out, proud as a king. And I stood there clutching a tiny box in my hands, the one Mom had placed in my lap 5 minutes earlier. Inside it was a pair of white socks, $2, the price tag still attached. Mom turned toward me with that soft, patronizing smile she'd perfected over the years. "Be grateful, Clara. Each one receives what they deserve." The laughter that followed sounded like glass breaking inside me. I smiled because that's what you do when you've been trained not to ruin the moment, but deep down something cracked. At 2 in the morning, when the snow had stopped and the house fell silent, I packed my suitcase. Before leaving, I placed one final gift under the tree, something they'd never forget. Inside that warm, glittering house, I used to think we were the picture of happiness. Dad owned a family restaurant in Portland. Mom managed the books. Lydia was the golden child, always charming, always adored. And me, I was the responsible one. The steady one. The one who made sure everything stayed running even when nobody noticed. For years, I believed that was enough. When Lydia squealed over her car, Mom wiped tears from her eyes and hugged her. "You deserve it, baby. You've worked so hard." Worked hard at what exactly, I wanted to ask. Posting pictures on the internet, smiling into a camera. But I stayed quiet. You don't ruin Christmas over jealousy. At least, that's what I told myself as Dad poured champagne and clinked glasses, with the neighbors bragging about how proud he was of his successful girls. Lydia turned to me, twirling her keys, laughing. "You'll have to ride with me now, Clara. We can't have you showing up in that old Civic anymore." Everyone laughed again except me. My smile felt like paper-thin fake ready to tear. Inside, a small voice whispered that this wasn't just about a car. It was about years of invisible giving. The unpaid debts. The phone calls that always started with "Sweetheart, can you help us out just this once?" The way once had turned into every month for 3 years. But I bit my tongue. Christmas wasn't the day for truth. Back inside, Lydia posed with her new car keys, the gold lights reflecting off her hair like a halo. Mom directed her like a proud producer. "Hold it up higher. Yes, that's perfect." Dad took another sip of his whiskey, laughing loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I sank into the corner of the couch, unwrapping the socks again just to have something to do with my hands. They were cheap, thin, fabric, scratchy, the kind you find near the checkout line when you're buying something else. The tag dangled from the side, bold and unapologetic, $1.99. I wondered if Mom even remembered buying them, or if she'd grabbed them last minute out of guilt. When she caught my eye, she smiled as if to say, "See, I remembered you." I nodded. "Thanks, Mom. They're practical." She laughed. "Well, not everyone can get a Rolls-Royce, right?" The room erupted again. Dad raised his glass. To family, I excused myself to the kitchen, pretending to get more cider. My hands were shaking. The laughter from the living room echoed through the house, blending with the faint hum of Lydia's new car engine as she turned it on and off for her social media video. Through the window, I watched snowflakes land on the silver hood, melting instantly. The headlights glowed like eyes staring back at me, unblinking. I leaned against the counter, fighting the heat rising behind my eyes. "Be grateful," Mom had said. The words looped like a broken song. Be grateful for what? For giving them years of my paycheck, for saving their house when they were behind on payments, for being invisible every holiday while Lydia shined. I had been grateful. I'd been generous. I'd been obedient. And look where it got me, standing in a kitchen full of people I no longer recognized, holding a mug of cold cider and wondering when love had turned into performance. Dad walked in, still smiling, unaware that my world had just split down the middle. "You okay, kiddo?" "I'm fine." He patted my shoulder. "Good. You've always been the strong one. We're lucky to have you." Strong one. The responsible one. The dependable one. Words that once felt like compliments now sounded like chains. When everyone finally went to bed, the house fell into the kind of silence that feels like confession. The Rolls-Royce sat in the driveway, reflecting the moonlight. I sat on my childhood bed, staring at the faded wallpaper, the stuffed bear still on the dresser. My phone buzzed with a new message from the bank, confirmation that the automatic transfer for my parents' mortgage had gone through, same as every month. $1,400. Merry Christmas. That was when the decision clicked into place, not with anger, but with a strange calm, like watching snow settle after a storm. I got up, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and began to pack. My movements were methodical: laptop, charger, sweater, toiletries. Each item folded neatly, as if organization could steady my shaking hands. I sat at the desk and wrote a short note on plain paper. "If you can afford luxury, you can afford honesty. The payments stop now. Merry Christmas." I slipped the note into a large envelope along with copies of my transfer receipts, 3 years worth, each line highlighted. $52,800. I placed it under the tree, tucked neatly among the glittering boxes, and tied a small red ribbon around it. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like returning something that was never mine to keep. At 2 a.m, I zipped my suitcase, put on my coat, and walked quietly through the house. The floorboards creaked softly, the air thick with pine and regret. I paused at the living room doorway, looking at the glowing tree, the reflection of the Rolls-Royce, through the window, the pile of perfect presents stacked for someone else. For years, I'd told myself that family meant sacrifice. But that night, standing in the silence of everything I'd bought and never received, I realized something new. Family doesn't mean giving until you disappear. It means being seen. I picked up my car keys, slipped out the door, and felt the cold air hit my face. My old Civic coughed to life like an old friend. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked one last time at the house, gold light spilling through the curtains, shadows still dancing from the fire. "Be grateful," I whispered. "I am." Then I drove away into the frozen dawn, leaving behind laughter that would die with the morning and a gift they would never forget. As I drove away from that house, the snow swallowing the sound of my tires, I couldn't help wondering when everything between us had started to go wrong, and the answer I would later realize began long before that Christmas morning. People always think resentment is born overnight, that one cruel Christmas can turn love into bitterness. It doesn't happen that way. It builds slowly, layer by layer, over years of little slights disguised as love. Before the Rolls-Royce, before the $2 socks, there were Sunday dinners filled with laughter, the smell of Mom's cinnamon bread, and Dad's terrible jokes about overcooked pasta. There were movie nights where Lydia would fall asleep on my shoulder, and Mom would say, "Look at you two, always so close." If someone had told me then that one day I'd walk away and never come back, I would have laughed. We were the Jennings family, solid, loyal, loving. Or at least, that's what I believed. When I was little, the restaurant was the heart of our home. Harold's Table sat on a corner in downtown Portland, a cozy place with red booths and string lights. Dad ran the kitchen. Mom handled the books, and I bussed tables after school for tips that went straight into a college savings jar. Lydia was still in pigtails back then, helping Dad deliver bread baskets to tables and charming the customers with her toothless grin. Every Sunday after closing, Dad would lock up early, and we'd eat dinner in the restaurant, with the lights dimmed, just us. He'd pour apple juice into wine glasses for us girls and say, "To family, the best investment you'll ever make." We'd all clink glasses, laughing at how fancy we thought we were. I used to think those moments meant something permanent, like a contract signed in love. But I learned later that memories don't stop people from changing. When I turned 18, I got a scholarship to study business at the University of Washington. I remember the day the letter arrived. Mom cried, Dad grilled steaks to celebrate Lydia, ran through the yard waving my acceptance letter like a flag. I left home believing I was walking toward a future that would make them proud. And at first they were proud. Every phone call began with our Clara's doing big things. They sent me care packages, called on weekends, asked about exams. Lydia, still in high school, would text me random selfies and complain about boys. It all felt normal, easy. The shift happened slowly, so quietly that I didn't even notice at first. Lydia grew up into a teenager who lived for attention. Makeup tutorials, selfies, TikToks before TikTok even existed. Mom loved showing off her creative spirit, always defending her. She's sensitive, she'd say. You were the serious one, Clara. Don't be so hard on her. And I tried not to be. When I came home from college for Christmas one year, Lydia had a brand new iPhone, a gift for her school projects, while I unwrapped a used coat. Practical gifts for our practical girl, Dad joked. I laughed because what else could I do? That was the first time I felt it, that tiny, uncomfortable sting of being useful, but not cherished. I pushed it down. Families have favorites, I told myself, but that doesn't mean they love you less. Years later, after graduation, I landed my first real job at a startup in Seattle. It was exciting, fast-paced, and the paycheck felt unreal. I remember calling home, barely able to keep my voice steady. I did it, I told them. Marketing manager at 24. Dad cheered over the phone, Mom said she was proud, and Lydia yelled from the background. Finally, someone in this family can buy decent wine. We laughed, and for a moment it felt like the old days again. But the calls that followed weren't about pride, they were about problems. The restaurant had been struggling since the pandemic. Fewer customers, rising costs, new competition. Just a small loan, Dad said one night, his voice tired. We're 2 months behind on rent for the place, just until things pick up. Of course I said yes. How could I not? They'd given me everything, at least that's what I thought. I wired them $1,200 the next morning and didn't tell anyone at work. It felt good to help, like being the adult version of the daughter they'd always been proud of. Then a month passed and another call came. Sweetheart, I hate to ask again, but we're still catching up. Just this one last time, okay? The one last time became the first of many. Every month the tone softened, the words more practiced. We're so lucky to have a daughter like you. God must be proud of your generosity. You've always been our rock. Praise disguised as expectation. I didn't recognize it then, but I was being trained, conditioned to feel guilty for wanting boundaries. Meanwhile, Lydia's social media was booming. She became an influencer with brand deals, beauty sponsorships, free hotel stays. My parents bragged endlessly. She's building something amazing. They flew down to Los Angeles to visit her, often taking pictures in rooftop bars, while I stayed in Seattle budgeting for the next transfer. Whenever I hinted at the imbalance, Mom would remind me, You've always been the strong one. She's still figuring things out. I learned to stop questioning it. I paid, they praised, and life went on. Then came the pandemic. Harold's table barely survived the shutdowns. When Dad called, his voice cracked for the first time. We might lose the house, Clara. Just until things get stable again. Of course, I said. The monthly transfers became automatic. I stopped counting. I stopped buying new clothes. My coworkers went on weekend trips, posted beach photos. I sat in my apartment eating instant noodles and telling myself this was what good daughters do. But the guilt started to curdle. I'd call home, hear Mom bragging about the restaurant's beautiful remodel, or see Lydia post pictures from expensive brunches. I started wondering how a family so broke could afford luxury handbags and decorative chandeliers. When I asked, Mom laughed. Oh, those a friend owed your father money. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Every time I considered stopping the payments, Dad's voice echoed in my head. Family doesn't abandon family. And just like that, the guilt won again. By the time Lydia graduated college, she had a part-time modeling job and a new car. "It's leased," she said, grinning. Dad helped with the down payment. I didn't ask where the money came from. I already knew. It was around then that I realized the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't a daughter anymore, I was an ATM with a pulse. The more I gave, the less they saw me. When I'd visit, the conversations weren't about me. They were about Lydia's projects, Dad's expansion plans, Mom's redecorating ideas. When I mentioned my long hours, they'd say, "You're lucky to have such a good job," as if luck not effort had gotten me there. I remember one Thanksgiving. I'd just driven 4 hours from Seattle, exhausted, when Lydia walked in wearing designer boots. "Aren't these cute?" she said, posing. Mom clapped. Dad smiled. Then Mom turned to me. "You didn't bring the sweet potatoes?" "No," I said quietly. "I thought Lydia was bringing them." Mom sighed. "You're both grown now. I shouldn't have to remind you about everything." It was a small comment, but it landed like a punch. I realized in that moment that I could pay their bills, but I'd never earn their grace. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat on the porch staring at the frost-covered yard. The same house I'd helped keep out of foreclosure now looked foreign, like a museum of a life that used to include me. The porch light flickered, and I could hear Dad's words echoing from years ago. "Family means showing up no matter what." I whispered into the dark, I did show up. I just didn't realize I was the only one paying the bill. Somewhere between those words and the breath that followed, something in me hardened. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first crack in the illusion, the beginning of the end. The moment love turned into a ledger I could no longer balance. I didn't know it then, but that quiet night on the porch was only the calm before the storm, the first small crack in a pattern that would soon become the biggest mistake of my life. It started with one phone call, the kind you answer without thinking, the kind that sounds like love. "Sweetheart, Dad," said his voice softer than usual, "we just need a little help. The restaurant's been slow since the pandemic. You know how it is." I could hear Mom in the background murmuring something about late payments, about the landlord getting impatient. "Just until we catch up," he promised. "Maybe a month or two." I didn't even hesitate. "Of course, Dad." That night I opened my banking app and transferred $1,200 to their account. It felt good in a way. I'd finally reached the point where I could help them the way they'd helped me. I told myself it was temporary, that it was my turn to give back. When Mom texted a heart emoji followed by, "You're such a blessing," I smiled. Family helping family, wasn't that how it was supposed to be? 3 weeks later, Dad called again. The tone was the same, but the words came faster, this time rehearsed. "Business hasn't picked up yet. The new delivery restrictions are killing us. Could you help us out one more month?" I said yes before he finished the sentence. By month 3, I didn't wait for them to ask. I set up an automatic transfer for the first of every month. $1,200. The payments went out quietly, like breath leaving my lungs. I hardly noticed at first. When I visited in the spring, the restaurant looked better than I expected. Fresh paint, new lighting fixtures, tables replaced with modern ones that gleamed under the warm bulbs. "Wow," I said, stepping inside. "It looks amazing." Mom smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "We had to spruce it up for when customers come back." I didn't ask how they afforded it. I didn't want to sound ungrateful for all they'd done. That night, we sat down for dinner at the restaurant. Dad opened a bottle of red wine, expensive one I'd never seen at home before, and poured everyone a glass. "To surviving," he said, raising his glass toward me. "Couldn't have done it without our responsible girl." I laughed, a little embarrassed but secretly proud. I told myself this was what family meant: sacrifice, support, shared struggle. When I drove back to Seattle the next day, I felt lighter, as if I'd done something good. But good things have a way of stretching into habits. By the end of that summer, the payments hadn't stopped. Every few months there was another reason. A slow week at the restaurant, a broken oven, a new tax they hadn't budgeted for. "We'll catch up soon," Dad said every time. You've been such a help. The words felt warm at first. Then they started to feel heavy. I'd open my bank app and watch the numbers go down, convincing myself I was fine. After all, I had a good job. I could afford it. But each month, it chipped away at something I couldn't name. My sense of freedom, maybe. My sense of being their daughter instead of their lender. Then came the dinner call. "Clara, we're having a family night this weekend," Mom said. "Just us. We miss you." It had been months since I'd visited. I drove down on Saturday, telling myself this would be a nice break. The house looked beautiful when I pulled up, fresh flowers on the porch, new curtains in the windows. Inside, the smell of roast beef and garlic filled the air. "Everything looks nice," I said. Mom beamed. "Business is finally looking up." I was happy for them until I saw the new espresso machine gleaming on the counter, the kind that cost at least $1,000. Dinner was loud laughter echoing across the table. Lydia was there too, talking about her new influencer campaign for a skincare brand. "It's all about authenticity," she said, adjusting her hair while scrolling through her phone. "Brands love that." Mom nodded proudly. "She's doing amazing things, Clara. You should see her latest posts," I smiled, politely cutting my food into tiny, meaningless pieces. When the plates were cleared, Dad leaned back with a sigh of contentment. "We're thinking of expanding the patio for next summer. Add a little outdoor seating." "Expanding?" I asked. "That sounds expensive." He shrugged. "You've got to spend money to make money, right?" Mom laughed. "Your father always says that." I wanted to ask where the money was coming from, but I swallowed the question. Instead, I nodded and said, "You're probably right." On the drive home, I couldn't shake the image of that espresso machine, the new furniture, the fresh paint. Maybe things were better than they'd let on. Maybe they didn't need my help anymore. So the next week I called Mom. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. Do you still want me to send the usual transfer this month?" She paused just long enough for me to hear the shift in her tone. "Oh, sweetheart, if you could, it would really help. We're still catching up from last month's expenses." I hesitated. "But I thought business was good." "It is," she said quickly. "We're just balancing things out. You know how bills pile up." The guilt hit instantly. I could practically hear the disappointment in her voice, the subtle shift from gratitude to expectation. "Of course," I said. "I'll send it tonight." After we hung up, I sat in silence. A week later at work, my colleague Rachel invited me on a weekend trip to the coast. "Come on," she said. "You need a break." I wanted to go so badly. But when I checked my account, the familiar sting hit. After rent, utilities, and the transfer, there wasn't enough. I told her I had too much work. That night I heated instant noodles for dinner and stared at the empty space above my kitchen table where a dining set should have been. Months turned into years. The transfers became part of my life, like taxes or breathing. No one mentioned stopping. Mom would call to chat, always slipping in a line about how things were tight. Dad would text photos of the restaurant, the caption always something like, "Hanging in there thanks to our girl." Meanwhile, Lydia's world sparkled brighter. She moved into a downtown apartment, posted selfies from rooftop bars, wore designer clothes. "Brand collaborations," she said when I asked. But deep down, I knew the truth. My money was woven into that lifestyle too. One evening during a video call, I asked Mom outright, "Do you think you and Dad will be okay soon? I mean, with the payments." Her smile faltered. "Why are you struggling?" "Not exactly," I said. "I just thought the restaurant was doing better." "It is," she said quickly. "But family sticks together. You'd do the same for us, right?" "You mean I already do?" I whispered. "What was that nothing?" She smiled again, that gentle, guilt-laced smile. "You've been such a blessing, Clara. We're so proud of you." When the call ended, I sat in the dark, phone still glowing in my hand. Proud of me for what? For not saying no, for pretending this was still love. A few weeks later, the air conditioner in my apartment broke during a heat wave. The repair cost was $800, money I didn't have because the transfer had already gone out. I spent 3 nights sweating through my sheets, fans blowing hot air around, before finally putting the repair on a credit card. The next morning, I scrolled through Facebook and stopped cold. Dad had posted a picture of a new flat-screen TV hanging in the restaurant. Upgrading for the customers, the caption read. I stared at the post until my eyes blurred. $800 for a TV while I was putting repairs on credit. That night, for the first time, I didn't schedule the next payment automatically. I sat at my desk, hovering over the transfer button, heart racing. Then Mom texted, "Hope you're okay, sweetheart. Don't forget the mortgage is due tomorrow. We're counting on you." My hand moved on its own. Transfer complete. As I closed my laptop, a sentence formed in my head, sharp and clear. They're not struggling anymore. I am. I tried to push it away, but it lingered. It echoed in every grocery line, every declined dinner invitation, every night I stayed home instead of living my life. And by the time the next Christmas rolled around, the truth had hardened inside me. This wasn't helping anymore. This was survival, just not mine. I told myself things would get better once they caught up on their bills, but instead, the only thing that kept growing was the guilt every time my phone rang. Guilt is a quiet thief. It doesn't kick down the door or shout. It just slips in while you're trying to be kind, rearranging your thoughts until you can't tell the difference between generosity and obligation. For me, guilt came wrapped in compliments. "You're such a blessing, Clara. You've always been the responsible one. God must be proud of you." Words that sounded like love but carried the weight of expectation. By the second year, Mom and Dad didn't even have to ask anymore. The payments were automatic, $1,200, leaving my account like clockwork on the first of every month. When I forgot once because of a work trip, Mom called that evening. "We didn't see the transfer," she said gently. "Is everything all right?" It wasn't a demand. It was disappointment. And disappointment in my family hurt worse than anger. "Oh, sorry. I just got busy," I said, rushing to open the banking app. "Oh, sweetheart, I understand," she said, her voice soft and warm. "You've always been such a good daughter." The moment the transaction went through, she said, "Thank you, honey. We're so proud of you." Then she hung up. It took me a full minute to realize she hadn't asked how I was doing. When we FaceTimed on Sunday nights, the praise continued. "You're our angel," Mom said. "You're keeping this family together." Dad would nod, Lydia would grin. Sometimes Lydia would chime in, "You're the best sister ever, Clara. We were just saying how lucky we are to have you." I used to smile my chest tight with something I couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe. Or maybe the slow suffocation of being useful. One evening, after a particularly long week at work, I got another call. "Honey, Mom said the restaurant is hosting a small fundraiser for the staff families next month. We'd love for you to be a part of it. It's for a good cause." "That's nice," I said, already sensing where this was going. She hesitated, then added, "We were thinking maybe you could contribute a little extra, just $3,000 to help kick it off. You'd be helping so many people." $3,000. My chest tightened. "Mom, I already help you every month." "I know, sweetheart, and we're so grateful. But this is different. It's for charity. You've been so blessed. This is your chance to give back." "I've been giving back for 3 years, I said quietly. Dad's voice came on the line, calm and firm. "Don't make this about money, Clara. It's about family." That was the end of the discussion. The next morning, I mailed them a check. A week later, Lydia posted a video from the fundraiser, smiling in her glittering dress, music playing, champagne glasses clinking. The caption read, "Couldn't have done it without my family's support." I watched it 3 times. My name wasn't mentioned. That night, I called my best friend Rachel. "I think my parents are using me," I said. Rachel didn't even hesitate. "They are." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "No, it's not like that. They just need help right now. Family helps family." "Clara," she said gently, "you're not helping them. You're carrying them." I went silent. Has it ever crossed your mind that they're not trying to get back on their feet? Because they already have you to lean on? Her words stung. That's not fair. Neither is what they're doing, she said. Love shouldn't feel like debt. I hung up soon after, angry at her for saying out loud what I'd been too afraid to admit. That night I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through my messages with Mom, hundreds of them. You're our angel. We can always count on you. You'd never abandon us, right? Every compliment suddenly looked like a chain. A few days later, I went home for dinner. The restaurant was packed, every table full. Lydia was hosting a live Q&A for her followers. Dad was chatting with customers, and Mom was managing the register. Business looked good, better than good. After closing, we sat down in one of the booths. Mom smiled proudly. We're so thankful you've supported us through the tough times. Are the tough times over now? I asked. She blinked. What do you mean the restaurant looks busy? You're talking about expanding the patio. You just hosted a fundraiser. Maybe it's time I stop sending money every month. The air changed instantly. Dad's expression hardened. Mom's smile faltered. Lydia looked up from her phone, eyes wide. Clara, Mom said softly. Don't ruin a nice evening with talk about money. I'm just saying maybe you don't need it anymore. Dad leaned forward. We'll let you know when we don't need help. Until then, family sticks together. The word family sounded more like a command than a comfort. On the drive back to Seattle, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my hands hurt. Rachel's words echoed in my head, love shouldn't feel like debt. That night I pulled up my online banking history and began scrolling. Line after line of identical transactions. $1,200, $1,200, $1,200. Over and over, month after month, year after year. I added them up. $45,600. I stared at the number until my vision blurred. How could I have let it go on this long? When I woke up the next morning, there was a voicemail waiting for me. Mom again, cheerful. Good morning, sweetheart. Just checking to see if you sent the transfer. Rent's due today. Love you. I deleted the message. Then I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and stared at the transfer page. My cursor hovered over the send button for a long time. For the first time in 3 years, I hesitated. But guilt is clever. It sneaks in through memory. I heard Mom's sigh, Dad's voice saying, We're proud of you. I saw Lydia's face lighting up when they called me our rock. And I clicked send. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stared out the window at the lights of the city. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like suffocation. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Rachel. You were right. But I don't know how to stop. Then I deleted it before sending. The next morning, I woke up early and sat on the couch, the sunlight spilling across the floor. I thought about the restaurant, the laughter, the fundraiser, the guilt. And I realized I wasn't angry at them. I was angry at myself. Angry that I'd confused kindness with weakness. That week, I started reading about financial abuse, about how people manipulate guilt to control others. Every article felt like a mirror I didn't want to look into. One line stayed with me. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's servitude. I copied it into my journal. A few days later, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom. Rent's due again, sweetie. You always know how to come through for us. I stared at the words, the casual certainty of them. Then I closed my phone and whispered into the empty apartment, not anymore. I didn't know it then, but that quiet whisper was the start of everything that would come next, the beginning of the end, and the first real moment I chose myself. I thought setting boundaries would give me peace, but instead, it only made their silence louder, and that silence was about to reveal the truth I'd been too afraid to see. The first lie didn't come from their mouths, it came in a photograph. Mom texted it to the family group chat one evening in late spring. The caption read, Finally finished the remodel. God is good. The picture showed her standing inside the restaurant, beaming under a brand new chandelier. Behind her, the walls were no longer the dull beige I remembered. They were deep green, trimmed in gold. The floors were polished hardwood. New tables gleamed under soft lighting. I zoomed in, taking in every detail, the framed artwork, the fancy chairs, the sleek espresso machine sitting proudly on the counter. Everything about it screamed money. I looked around my own apartment, bare walls, thrifted furniture, the same flickering floor lamp I'd had since college. On my table sat a can of soup I'd planned to stretch into 2 dinners. The contrast was almost funny. "Looks great, Mom," I typed, my thumbs shaking. "Doesn't it?" she replied almost instantly. "Business is finally turning around." I stared at the screen. If business was turning around, why was I still paying their bills? Later that night, I opened my laptop and checked my banking app. Another transfer had gone out that morning, $1,200, same as always. I leaned back, feeling the exhaustion of it all settle in. I'd spent 3 years believing this money was saving them. But the truth was, it had only made them comfortable enough to forget the meaning of temporary. A few days later, I logged onto Instagram, and Lydia's smiling face filled my feed. She was in Napa Valley, glass of champagne in hand, posing in front of a vineyard. The caption read, "Weekend getaway with the fam, the fam." I clicked the video she'd posted. Music played over quick cuts of clinking glasses, a 5-star suite, and a rooftop dinner at sunset. At the 10-second mark, I froze the frame. In the background, reflected in a mirror, I could see Mom laughing, wearing a floral dress I'd never seen before. My heart pounded. A few minutes later, I texted her, "Hey, didn't you say the restaurant was short on staff this weekend?" Her reply came fast. "Oh, we needed a little break, sweetheart. Lydia invited us along. It was mostly for her content. She got a discount." A discount. I dropped my phone onto the couch, closed my eyes, and exhaled. Every excuse sounded polished, rehearsed, guilt-proof. A week later, Dad called during my lunch break. "Just checking in," he said cheerfully. "How's work? Busy?" I said. "How's the restaurant? Good. We might actually have our best quarter yet." "That's great," I said, forcing my voice steady. "So, does that mean you'll be taking over the mortgage soon?" Silence. He cleared his throat. "Let's not complicate things. You're doing so well, Clara. It's no trouble for you." "It's been 3 years, Dad. We'll talk about it later," he said quickly, and changed the subject to Lydia's latest influencer milestone. When we hung up, my hands were trembling. I couldn't tell if it was anger or disbelief or maybe both. That night, Rachel came over with takeout and wine. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, kicking off her shoes. I told her everything: the remodel, the trip, the phone call. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "Clara, that's not a family struggling to survive. That's a family living on your money." I laughed bitterly. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," she said. "They're using you. They've been using you." I wanted to argue, but the truth sat too heavy to fight. A month later, it was my birthday. Mom called in the morning, cheerful as always. "Happy birthday, honey. We can't wait to see you tonight." When I arrived, the house looked immaculate. New furniture, fresh paint, expensive-smelling candles burning on every surface. Lydia was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, wearing designer pajamas. "Happy birthday," she sang, giving me a quick hug before turning back to her screen. Dinner was lovely, like always. Too lovely. Perfect table settings, 3 courses, wine I couldn't afford. Afterward, we moved to the living room for gifts. A small pile sat under the coffee table, wrapped in shiny paper. I tried not to notice how most of them were labeled to Lydia. When Mom handed me mine, I smiled politely. Inside was a scented candle and a clearance picture frame, price tags still on both. "Something for your apartment," she said brightly. "You're always so practical." I thanked her, forcing warmth into my voice. Lydia opened her gifts next: designer sunglasses from Dad, a luxury skincare set from Mom, a new camera lens for work. I stared at the flicker of the candle on the table and wondered how many mortgage payments those gifts represented. When dessert was over, Lydia pulled out her phone. Guess what she said? "I signed a new brand deal today." Mom clapped. Dad beamed. Lydia turned the camera toward them, recording for her story. "My family is my biggest support," she said. "Couldn't have done it without them." Not a single glance in my direction. I left early, claiming I had work the next day. As I drove home, I fought the urge to cry. I wasn't even sad anymore, just tired. Tired of the charade. The selective gratitude, the way they praised me for my reliability while ignoring the cost of it. A week later, I got an alert from my bank, an email I almost deleted out of habit. Unusual activity detected. My stomach dropped. I logged in, and there it was, a secondary account linked to mine, one I didn't recognize. I called the bank immediately. "Can you tell me who has access to this account?" I asked. The representative checked. "It appears to be connected to the business account of Harold's Table. A joint access authorization was added 3 years ago under a family sharing agreement." "That's your father, correct?" For a moment I couldn't breathe. "Yes," I said quietly. "So he can move funds between accounts?" "Yes, ma'am. It's part of the authorization." "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking as I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. The transfer logs flashed in my mind, the hundreds of lines, the endless 1,200 repeating like a heartbeat. They hadn't just accepted my help, they'd built their comfort around it. Later that night, I printed 3 years of statements, highlighting every transfer, every dollar. I spread the papers across my kitchen table like evidence in a trial. Lydia's laughter from that birthday echoed in my head. Mom's voice saying, "Be grateful." Dad's words, "We'll let you know when we don't need help." They knew exactly what they were doing. I sat there gripping the papers so tightly they crinkled. For the first time I felt something colder than anger, clarity. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the lie that I mattered only when I was useful. As the city lights flickered outside my window, I whispered into the quiet, "No more." Then, almost without thinking, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Its name was Simple Final Proof. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't calculating what I owed them. I was calculating what they owed me. By the time December came around, the weight of those bank statements had become unbearable, and I knew there was only one way left to end the game they'd been playing for years. The decision came quietly, not in anger, but in exhaustion. One night in early December, I sat at my kitchen table with the stack of printed bank statements spread out before me, each page highlighted in yellow. 3 years, 36 months, $52,800. I'd underlined the total at the bottom in red ink, the way an accountant marks a deficit that can't be ignored. The number glowed under the lamplight, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding but never healed. Outside, the city was wrapped in winter. Snow gathered on rooftops, muffling the world. Inside my apartment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the soft hiss of the radiator. I took a deep breath and whispered the words I hadn't dared say out loud. "They don't love me for me. They love me for what I give." The sentence hung in the air, heavy and true. I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing a letter, not one born from fury but from finality. "Mom, Dad, I've been helping you because I wanted to believe it was temporary. Because I believed you when you said things were hard. But I can't keep living like this, paying your bills while you live like nothing's wrong. If you can afford luxury, you can afford your own mortgage. The transfers stop now. Merry Christmas." I printed it, signed my name, and placed it on top of the bank statements. Then I sat back, staring at the pile as if it were alive. Maybe it was the physical weight of every compromise I'd made. When Christmas came, I told them I'd be visiting as usual. Mom sounded thrilled. "Oh good, we're going all out this year. Lydia's been planning something special." "Of course she has," I murmured under my breath. I arrived on Christmas Eve, the house glittering like a catalog cover. Every window was trimmed with lights, the tree towering over the living room in gold and silver ornaments. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, but instead of warmth, it made me feel claustrophobic. Everything was too perfect, too staged. Clara Mom rushed to hug me, wearing a deep red dress that looked brand new. Dad followed, glass of whiskey in hand. Our girls' home Lydia appeared on the stairs, her hair perfectly styled, her pajama set made of silk. "Finally," she said, half laughing. "You're just in time for the surprise." "What surprise?" I asked, though I already felt the answer forming in my gut. She grinned. "You'll see." We spent the evening pretending. I helped in the kitchen, wrapped last-minute gifts, and listened as they talked about business booming again. Dad bragged about new customers, Mom said they were finally stable, and Lydia scrolled through her phone, humming Christmas songs. That night I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. My suitcase sat open on the floor, half-packed for the return trip. The envelope with the bank statements rested on my nightstand. I traced the edge of it with my finger and thought about the years I'd spent believing this family could be fixed if I just gave enough. At dawn, I woke to the sound of laughter downstairs. I stayed quiet for a moment, listening. Ready, Dad's voice called out. Now Lydia squealed. I came down the stairs just in time to see him holding up a set of keys, shiny under the Christmas lights. To our baby girl, he said, tossing them to Lydia. A little something to celebrate all your hard work. Lydia gasped, tears filling her eyes. No way, you didn't. Come see for yourself, Mom said, laughing as they led her to the garage. Through the window, I watched Lydia open the door and freeze. Parked in the driveway was a silver Rolls-Royce, gleaming under the morning sun, a giant red bow stretched across the hood. She screamed, the sound splitting through the quiet like glass. Dad laughed. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I stood frozen in the doorway. The car reflected the light like a mirror, and in that reflection I saw myself small, tired, forgotten. Mom turned to me, smiling brightly. Don't look so shocked. We saved for this for months. Saved, I said quietly. Dad nodded. Business has been good, honey. Best year we've had since before the pandemic. Best year, I repeated. My throat tightened. And you're still taking my money every month. Their smiles faltered. Mom blinked, unsure how to respond. I swallowed hard, forcing the calm back into my voice. I'm happy for you. Really. Lydia was already sitting in the driver's seat, squealing. Oh my God, it even has custom leather. This is insane. I turned and walked back inside, my hands shaking. I found my coat, slipped it on, and headed toward the kitchen. The coffee maker sat on the counter, the same one I'd bought them 2 Christmases ago, when they said theirs had broken. It gleamed spotless, like it had never been used. I placed the envelope next to it, right by the machine they didn't need. When I came back to the living room, they were still outside, laughing, taking pictures. Lydia kissed Dad on the cheek. Mom wiped away tears. I stood by the tree, looking at the mountain of gifts piled beneath it. My name appeared on only 2. I sat on the couch and waited. The laughter outside slowly died as they came back, in cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Your turn, Clara, Mom said cheerfully, handing me a small box wrapped in glittery paper. Inside was a pair of white socks, cheap, thin. The price tag still attached, $2.99. Be grateful, Mom said, smiling. Each one receives what they deserve. Something inside me went completely still. Thank you, I said softly. They're perfect. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of sound and motion. Lydia posed by her car for photos. Mom and Dad beamed like proud royalty, and I smiled at the right moments, said the right words, played the part of the good daughter one last time. That night, long after everyone went to bed, I packed my suitcase again. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. I walked downstairs and looked around the living room one final time, the tree glowing softly, the ornaments reflecting the light, the silver car visible through the window. I picked up the socks, folded them neatly, and tucked them into my bag. Then I turned toward the kitchen and glanced at the envelope. My letter. My proof. My goodbye. I whispered to the empty room, Merry Christmas. At 2 a.m, I closed the door behind me and stepped into the cold. The air bit at my cheeks as I dragged my suitcase down the driveway. The Rolls-Royce gleamed under the porch light, its silver surface catching the faint reflection of the stars. I paused beside it, looking at my own distorted reflection in the polished metal. For a long moment I said nothing. Then I smiled, a small, tired smile. For once, I whispered, I'm not the one paying. Then I turned away, climbed into my old Honda Civic, and drove into the snow, leaving behind the family who'd mistaken my kindness for currency. By the time the sun rose, I was miles away. The phone on the seat beside me buzzed with missed calls, notifications, voicemails. I didn't pick up. I didn't need to, because I already knew what would happen next. When they woke up, they'd find the envelope on the counter. They'd open it, and for the first time in years, they'd see the truth. Not the version they told themselves, but the one I'd been living. And this time, I wouldn't be there to explain. By the time the sun rose over the empty highway, I didn't feel anger anymore, just a strange, weightless calm, unaware that by the next morning that calm would be shattered by the sound of their desperate calls. The first voicemail came before sunrise. I woke to the faint buzz of my phone, vibrating on the nightstand, its glow cutting through the darkness. For a moment I forgot what day it was, where I was, why I felt so light. Then, the memory of last night hit me, the snow, the quiet road, the house fading in my rearview mirror, the envelope on the counter. I smiled into the silence. The phone buzzed again. Mom, the screen read. I let it ring. By noon there were 7 missed calls. By evening there were 23. I turned the phone face down and brewed coffee, humming softly to drown out the buzzing. I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. When I finally checked my messages, the first voicemail was Mom's voice, shaky but polite. Sweetheart, we found your note. We're just so confused. Can you call us back, please? The second was Dad's, calmer, clipped. Clara, this is uncalled for. We can talk like adults, but this behavior, this disappearing act, it's not right. The third was Lydia's, her voice cracked between disbelief and fury. What the hell, Clara? You ruined everything. Do you even realize what you've done to Mom and Dad? You're jealous. Admit it. I listened to the rest one by one until the voicemails bled into each other, a collage of guilt, confusion, and accusation. By Christmas night, I turned my phone off completely. The days that followed passed in strange, peaceful rhythm. I went for long walks in the snow, bought groceries without calculating every dollar, even took myself out to dinner at a small Italian place near my apartment. The waiter smiled as he poured my wine. Celebrating something, I laughed softly. Yeah, freedom. But silence has a way of echoing. Every so often, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and think of them, the house, the laughter, the silver car sitting in the driveway. I'd picture Mom's face when she read my letter, Dad's expression hardening, Lydia's outrage. It wasn't revenge that kept me up. It was the ache of realizing I'd never been seen. On the third day after Christmas, I turned my phone back on. 37 missed calls, dozens of unread messages. The newest one was a text from Dad. This tantrum needs to stop. Another, from Mom. We're embarrassed, Clara. The neighbors are asking questions. Lydia's message came last. You've destroyed this family. Hope you're happy. I deleted all of them. The following weekend, I decided to buy a car. A real one this time, nothing fancy but something reliable. Something that didn't rattle every time I hit a stoplight. I walked into the dealership with cash in my account, no guilt attached, no quiet voice reminding me of someone else's bills. When the salesman handed me the keys to a dark blue SUV, I nearly cried. Driving home, I rolled the windows down, even though the air was freezing. The wind hit my face sharp and alive. For the first time in years, the road ahead felt like it belonged to me. 2 days later, the phone rang again. Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something in me softened. I pressed accept. Clara, she breathed, relief flooding her voice. Oh, thank God. You're all right. I'm fine, I said evenly. We don't understand. We found the papers, the transfers, the letter. You didn't have to do this, didn't I said quietly. She went silent for a beat. Your father is furious. He says we could lose the house now. I closed my eyes. Mom, you were supposed to take over the payments 3 years ago. You had a restaurant. Lydia had sponsorships. You had money for remodels, trips, and luxury cars. How did you expect me to keep pretending you were struggling? It wasn't like that, she said quickly. We just wanted to give Lydia something special. She's had a tough time, Mom, I interrupted. You gave her a Rolls-Royce. Silence. Then softly, You've always been so responsible, Clara. We just thought you could handle it better than she could. That's not love, I said. That's convenience. Her voice trembled. You'll regret this one day. I already did, I said, and hung up. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The anger had drained out of me, replaced by something colder clarity. They would never understand. To them, my silence was cruelty. To me, it was survival. A week passed. The calls slowed, then stopped. I blocked their numbers one by one. My apartment filled with quiet, and for once the quiet didn't feel lonely, it felt earned. One morning, Rachel came over for coffee. She looked around my apartment, eyes widening. You redecorated. I smiled. It's amazing what you can do when you're not funding someone else's lifestyle. She laughed, but her gaze softened. Do you miss them every day? I said honestly. But I don't miss who I had to be to keep them happy. That afternoon, I opened my journal for the first time in months and began to write. Not about anger or money or betrayal, about rediscovery. I wrote about quiet mornings, the smell of fresh coffee, the way sunlight hit my window. I wrote about learning to exist without permission. When I finished, I read the last line aloud. I used to mistake obedience for love. Now I know love doesn't ask you to disappear. A few days later, the guilt started to fade. It wasn't gone completely, just smaller, like a bruise that no longer hurt when pressed. I went to yoga, cooked real meals, called old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. One evening, I walked past a boutique and stopped at the window. Inside, a mannequin wore a soft gray coat, simple and elegant. I walked in and bought it without hesitation. At the counter, the cashier smiled. This is one of our best sellers. It suits you. It's about time something did, I said. That night, as I hung the coat in my closet, my phone buzzed again. An unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. Clara, the voice was shaky, familiar. Lydia? What do you want? She sniffled. They're losing it, Clara. Mom's crying all the time. Dad's yelling. Everyone's talking about you, saying you ran away, that you're selfish. I'm not surprised. You could have just talked to them. I did, I said. For 3 years. She went quiet. They really can't pay the mortgage now. What are they supposed to do? I exhaled. Figure it out. That's cold. No, I said. That's adulthood. She hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed, the silence pressing in again. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, for all of them. Then I remembered the laughter in the garage, the gleaming silver car, the $2 socks. The pity faded. The next morning, I drove my new car to the coast. The ocean was gray, restless, alive. I walked along the beach until my shoes filled with sand and the wind tangled my hair. The waves crashed over and over, relentless but cleansing. I closed my eyes and let the salt air sting my face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. By the time I drove home, the sun was setting behind the clouds, painting the water gold. My phone sat in the cup holder, silent, for once not carrying anyone else's weight. When I parked outside my apartment, I turned off the engine and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. You did the right thing, I whispered. You saved yourself. It wasn't triumph. I felt it was peace, the quiet kind that comes after choosing yourself, even when it hurts. That night before I went to bed, I placed my phone face down on the nightstand and smiled. For the first time in my life, silence wasn't punishment. It was freedom. I thought their silence meant it was finally over, but as Christmas morning approached, I realized the real reckoning hadn't even begun. It was waiting for them under the tree. Christmas morning sparkled like a lie dressed in tinsel. I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine every detail: the golden glow of the living room, Lydia's squeals bouncing off the walls, the camera rolling as Mom filmed her perfect family moment. Outside, the silver Rolls-Royce glimmered under a dusting of snow, the giant red bow stretching across its hood like a crown. Inside, under the tree, lay one small envelope with my name on it. That was the gift I left them, the one that would make every laugh die in their throats. From what I later heard, it started beautifully. Dad poured champagne, Mom wore her best jewelry, and Lydia twirled in her pajamas, clutching her phone as she live-streamed the big reveal. "Merry Christmas, everyone," she'd said into the camera. "I can't believe what my amazing parents got me." Dad grinned, holding up the keys. "Go on, sweetheart, take a look." Lydia screamed when she saw the car, her voice piercing through the morning air. "Oh my God, are you serious? A Rolls-Royce." She covered her mouth, pretending to cry, while her followers flooded the comments with heart emojis and disbelief. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "You deserve it, honey. You've worked so hard this year." Worked hard. That phrase played in my head like an old record with a scratch. Lydia's work consisted of posting selfies and unboxing free products, while I worked 60-hour weeks keeping my parents' house from foreclosure. Dad clapped his hands. "All right, everyone, time for the rest of the gifts." They gathered back around the tree. Laughter, tearing paper, Lydia's mountain of presents stacked high like trophies. Mom unwrapped a designer purse, Dad got a new golf set. The house must have looked like a catalog spread, every corner glowing with proof of abundance. Then Mom noticed the envelope. "Oh, look," she said, picking it up from under the branches. "It's from Clara." Lydia rolled her eyes. "Let me guess, a framed motivational quote." Mom chuckled. Now, let's see what it is." She tore the envelope open, smiling until the papers fell out. A thick stack of printed bank statements clipped neatly together, every page lined with yellow highlights. On top, in my handwriting, a note. "If you can afford a Rolls-Royce, you can afford your own mortgage. The transfers stop now. Merry Christmas." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that makes the air too heavy to breathe. Dad blinked, confused, his smile faltering. "What the hell is this?" Mom's face drained of color. "She's exaggerating," she said quickly, flipping through the pages. "These can't all be." "Every month," Lydia interrupted, snatching the papers. Her voice trembled as she scanned the numbers. "She's been paying the mortgage for 3 years. Dad grabbed the stack from her hands, flipping through it. $1,200. Every month. His voice got louder. "You told me she wanted to help." Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. "She did," she stammered. "At first, she insisted. I insisted for 6 months. She might have heard my voice echoing in her head. Not 3 years. Lydia's face twisted. "So what, you've been taking her money while buying me a car?" "Don't start." Dad snapped. "This isn't about you." "Oh, it's definitely about me," Lydia shouted. "You made me look like an idiot on camera. Everyone thinks we're rich." Mom slammed the papers onto the coffee table. "She didn't have to humiliate us like this." Dad ran a hand through his hair. "We need to call the bank." "If she really stopped the payments, she did," Mom said faintly, pointing to the last line of the letter. The words hung in the air, final and sharp. Somewhere outside, the Rolls-Royce sat gleaming its bow, catching the winter light. Lydia's live stream, still running, had captured enough of the chaos to leak online before she realized it. Comments poured in. "Wait, isn't her sister the one who paid their bills? This family's fake AF. Karma's early this year." Within an hour, the video had been saved, reposted, and dissected by strangers. Inside, the house exploded. Dad slammed the papers onto the counter. "This is ridiculous. She's manipulating us." Mom's voice cracked. "We were supposed to fix things before she found out." "Fix things," Lydia shouted. "You bought me a Rolls-Royce. It was your father's idea," Mom screamed. Dad turned on her. "You agreed. You said Clara would never know. She wasn't supposed to find out." But she had. And their voices, those familiar, overlapping tones of love turned toxic, echoed off the walls that I had paid for. From the street outside, a neighbor recorded the scene through their window, later uploading it with the caption, "Christmas drama next door. Guess money doesn't buy peace." It went viral overnight. Mom and Dad's social media pages filled with angry comments. Lydia lost sponsorships. The restaurant's Google reviews tanked. Even their friends stopped answering calls. The perfect family image shattered in less than 24 hours. Meanwhile, I was hundreds of miles away, sitting in a quiet cafe, sipping coffee, and watching the snow fall outside the window. The TV in the corner was playing a local news segment about a family Christmas gone wrong. They didn't say our names, but they didn't have to. I smiled faintly and whispered to myself, the gift wasn't money, it was truth. Back at the house, the silence after the storm was worse than the shouting. Mom sat on the couch, face pale, eyes red from crying. The stack of statements lay scattered across the floor, some pages wrinkled, others torn. Dad stood by the window staring out at the car he now hated the sight of. Lydia scrolled through her phone, reading the hate comments. "Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed. "We're a joke now. A viral joke." Mom's voice was barely audible. "She didn't mean to ruin us." Dad's jaw tightened. "Didn't she?" He picked up one of the pages, the ink smudged from tears or spilled coffee. The total glared back at him like a verdict. $52,800. For the first time he looked small, like a man who had spent years convincing himself the lie was love. By nightfall the house was still. The lights from the tree flickered weakly. Outside, snow fell in heavy, wet flakes, burying the tire tracks of the car Lydia had driven earlier. No one spoke. And miles away in my small apartment, I sat by the window watching the same snowfall. The world felt clean, quiet, untouched by guilt. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry anymore, just calm. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of something new, freedom perhaps, or the faint sound of my own life coming back to me. They would call again, of course. They would try to twist the story to make me the villain. But that didn't matter, because for the first time in years the story was mine. As the city lights blurred through the snow, I whispered Merry Christmas, not to them, but to myself, to the woman who had finally stopped paying for everyone else's happiness. Somewhere in that big glittering house full of silence and shame, they were finally learning what it meant to live without me. And for once, that was the best gift I could ever give them. By the time the chaos faded and their perfect world began to crumble, I was already miles away, ready to let the silence speak louder than any revenge ever could. The first week after Christmas felt like standing in the eye of a storm, eerily calm, but you knew destruction was still circling somewhere out there. I turned my phone off completely and let the world exist without me. For once, I didn't feel responsible for fixing anything. I made coffee in the mornings without guilt, went for long walks through the frosted streets, and came home to silence that didn't suffocate me. But peace, I learned, comes with echoes. By the second day, the missed calls had climbed to over 30. When I finally turned my phone on again, my inbox was a battlefield, voicemails layered with apology, anger, and panic. Mom's first message came softly, like a woman trying to sound calm in a burning house. "Sweetheart, we found your note. We don't understand what you meant, but we love you. Please call." Then her voice hardened in the next one. "This is embarrassing, Clara. We don't air family business like this. You're making us look bad." By the fifth voicemail, she was crying. "Your father can't eat." Lydia hasn't stopped crying. "Please, honey, we can fix this. We just need to talk." Dad's messages were shorter, colder. "This behavior is immature. You're being dramatic. We raised you better than this." And Lydia's, "Those were pure venom. You're jealous. You ruined my career. I hope you're happy destroying our family." I deleted every single one. Then I blocked their numbers. The next morning, I walked to a small cafe near my apartment. It was half empty, the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. I sat by the window, ordered a cappuccino, and opened my laptop to check my work emails. For the first time in years, I didn't have to calculate what was left after a transfer. My money was mine. Halfway through my drink, I opened a tab I'd been avoiding, the local news. There it was, headline after headline: Portland family faces financial scandal after viral Christmas video. Influencer Lydia Jennings loses major sponsorship deals. Harold's Table shuts down, temporarily following public backlash. The article quoted an anonymous source claiming a family member exposed years of hidden financial mismanagement. I closed my laptop and took another slow sip of coffee. My hands weren't shaking. By evening, Rachel stopped by. She didn't even knock, just let herself in. "You're all over the internet," she said, tossing her coat over the chair. "I saw the video. Clara, what did you do?" "Nothing," I said, smiling faintly. "I just stopped doing everything." Rachel exhaled, sinking into the chair opposite me. "They're a mess." Lydia posted some half-hearted apology video before deleting her account. "People are calling it the Rolls-Royce Christmas scandal." I almost laughed. "Of course they are. So what now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "I live." For the first time in years, I started building a routine that didn't revolve around survival. I joined a yoga class, subscribed to a meal kit service, and bought a plant I wasn't sure I could keep alive. I even splurged on a new coffee maker, sleek and silver, the kind I used to see in catalogs and think someday. That someday was now. But peace has a strange way of testing you. One evening, about a week after the story broke, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject line, "We need to talk." It was from Mom. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Clara, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please understand your father is not well. He hasn't been sleeping and the stress is making his health worse. We're in trouble with the mortgage again. Please call. We need you." For a moment, I almost did. Old instincts kicked in, the need to fix, to protect, to save. But then I looked around my apartment. Everything here, from the lamp to the chair I was sitting on, existed because I had finally chosen myself. I closed the email and deleted it. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. Not an email. Not a text. A physical letter, my name written in Mom's looping cursive. Inside, her words were shaky, smudged, like she'd written them through tears. "Clara, your father had a scare last night. His heart," they said. "He's stable now, but we're terrified. The restaurant is closed for good, and the bank is threatening foreclosure. We don't know what to do. Please just call. Please." I folded the letter and set it on the counter. My throat burned, but I didn't cry. Because somewhere deep down, I knew this was where their choices had led them. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying years of moments I used to think were love, the compliments, the guilt trips, the small manipulations that always ended with, "You're such a blessing." I thought about Dad's toast, the one he used to make at family dinners, "To family, the best investment you'll ever make." Maybe that was the problem. I had stopped being a daughter and become a return on investment. The next morning, I sat on my balcony watching the city wake up. The air was crisp, the sun slicing through the gray clouds. I took a deep breath, and for the first time the guilt didn't crush me, it just sat beside me quietly. Smaller, now manageable. I whispered into the cold air, they made their choices. So did I. 3 weeks passed without another message. I thought maybe they'd finally accepted it, that this was the new reality. But then Rachel called one evening, her voice low. "You should see this," she said. She sent me a link. It was a video posted by one of Lydia's old influencer friends. The caption read, "The truth behind the Jennings family collapse." The clip showed Lydia sitting in her apartment, makeup-free, eyes red from crying. "She abandoned us," Lydia said, voice trembling. "My sister. She just left in the middle of the night and destroyed everything. My parents are losing their home. My dad's sick. All because she wanted attention." I closed the video halfway through. Rachel's voice came through the phone. "Clara, don't let it get to you. Everyone can see she's spinning the story." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I know. But it still hurts." "I know," she said softly. "But you did the right thing." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet again, staring at the city lights outside my window. Somewhere out there, my family was unraveling. And for the first time, I wasn't part of the mess. That realization didn't bring joy, it brought peace. The kind that doesn't come from winning, but from finally walking away. A few days later, I woke early, brewed coffee, and looked out at the pale winter sky. Snow had started falling again, soft and slow. I whispered to myself, "This is what freedom feels like." My phone buzzed with a new message, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before opening it. "We lost the house." It was from Lydia. I set the phone down, closed my eyes, and exhaled. I thought about calling her, asking where they'd go, if Dad was okay. But then I remembered the laughter, the Rolls-Royce, the words, "Be grateful." So instead I whispered to the empty room I am. And that morning, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing peace over family. I just felt whole. I thought the worst was over once they lost the house. But karma wasn't done yet. It was only beginning to collect what was truly owed. I used to think karma would arrive quietly, like justice delivered on tiptoe. But when it finally came for my family, it was loud, messy, human, and impossible to ignore. The first call came from Lydia. Her voice was flat, stripped of all the fake sweetness I'd grown used to. "They shut down the restaurant," she said. "The landlord changed the locks this morning." For a moment I said nothing. "Mom's losing it," she continued. "Dad's trying to talk to the bank, but they're not answering. Everything's falling apart." I closed my eyes. "You mean everything they built on my money?" "Don't do that," she snapped. "This isn't the time to be cruel. It's not cruelty, Lydia. It's truth." She exhaled sharply. "You're unbelievable. You think this is funny?" "No," I said quietly. "I think it's inevitable." She hung up. A few hours later, I saw the headline, "Harold's table closes after financial dispute." There was a picture of Dad, standing outside the restaurant, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Mom was beside him, arms folded tightly, as if trying to hold herself together. The article mentioned months of unpaid rent and a loss of investor confidence. They'd called it a dispute. I called it the end of a lie. The news spread fast. Lydia's name resurfaced in every gossip feed. Influencer family faces scandal after viral Christmas video. Her sponsorships vanished one by one. Comment sections filled with mockery and pity. I didn't read them all, but the few I saw were brutal. Didn't her sister pay their bills? Guess karma drives a Rolls-Royce too. I thought maybe the shame would make them stop. It didn't. 2 nights later, Mom left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, please call me. Your father's blood pressure is up. He's not sleeping. We can't lose the house too. Please." I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, listening to her words dissolve into tears. For a brief, painful second, guilt rose up like an old reflex. But then I remembered that I'd been living with that same tightness in my chest for 3 years. Every time I'd checked my account balance, every time I'd chosen ramen over groceries, every time they'd told me I was the responsible one. I didn't call back. The next day, another message came, this time from Dad. "You've made your point," he said coldly. "But you've embarrassed us. We can't even show our faces at church. Is that what you wanted?" What I wanted was honesty. What I wanted was respect. But he'd never understand that. To him, this was betrayal. To me, it was freedom. The following week, Rachel came over with takeout. She placed the food on the table and looked at me carefully. "They're all over the news again," she said softly. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "They're not." "Does that make you feel better?" I thought about it for a long time. No. Just lighter. 3 days later, Lydia called again. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad's in the hospital," she said, her voice trembling. I froze. What stress? They said it was a mild heart attack. He's okay, but... Mom's terrified. I closed my eyes. For a moment, the anger melted away, replaced by something raw and heavy. Whatever else he'd done, he was still my father. "Where is he?" I asked. She told me. That evening, I drove to the hospital, my heart pounding the entire way. The building loomed gray and cold against the winter sky. I almost turned around twice before forcing myself through the sliding doors. Mom was in the waiting room, her makeup smudged, hair unkempt. When she saw me, she broke down completely. "Oh, thank God," she sobbed, grabbing my hands. "He keeps asking for you." I followed her down the hall to his room. The sound of machines filled the silence. Dad lay pale, and still a shadow of the man who used to fill every room with his presence. His eyes opened when he heard me. "Clara," he whispered. I stepped closer, unsure what to say. "You're here," he murmured. "After everything." "I didn't come to fight," I said. He gave a weak smile. "Good, I'm too tired for fighting." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt like years collapsing into minutes. Finally, he spoke again. "We lost the restaurant." "I know." He stared at the ceiling. "And the house?" "We might lose that too." I didn't answer. He turned his head slightly toward me. "I didn't realize what we were doing to you." "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "You just didn't want to see it." He didn't argue. His eyes closed, and for a moment he looked peaceful, like a man who'd finally stopped pretending. When I stepped out into the hallway, Mom was waiting. "He's scared," she said, wiping her eyes. "We all are, I know. Can't you just help this once, Mom?" "It was never just once." She shook her head. "We're family, Clara. Family helps." I met her gaze. "Family doesn't use." Her lip trembled and she turned away. That night I sat in the hospital parking lot with the engine running, staring at the falling snow. My breath fogged up the windshield as I whispered to no one. They built this, not me. The next morning I called the hospital. Dad was stable. Mom didn't answer my texts. Lydia posted a cryptic story online, something about betrayal and forgiveness. I ignored it. A few days later, another message came. This time, Mom's voice wasn't pleading, it was defeated. "The bank gave us 30 days to pay what's owed," she said. "Otherwise, they'll take the house. We don't know what to do." I almost replied, "Sell the Rolls-Royce." But I didn't. Instead, I turned off my phone again and sat by the window watching the snow drift past. For years, I'd believed peace meant fixing things, making sure everyone else was okay, so I wouldn't have to feel guilty. But peace, I was learning, sometimes means letting things fall apart. A week later, Rachel called. "You did what you had to do," she said. "You gave them every chance." "This isn't on you." "I know," I said. "But knowing doesn't make it easy." "Maybe not," she said, "but it makes it right." After we hung up, I looked around my apartment, small, quiet, and mine. For the first time, I saw it not as an escape, but as a beginning. Outside, the snow had stopped. The streets were clear again, ready for whatever came next. As I sat there with my coffee cooling in my hands, I realized something simple and profound. I didn't need revenge anymore. Karma had already done the work, and sometimes that's the cruelest kind of justice, the kind you don't have to deliver yourself. I thought walking away was the end of our story, but as the months passed and the noise faded, life began quietly teaching me what freedom and forgiveness really meant. Peace didn't come the way I expected. It didn't feel like triumph or relief. It felt like quiet mornings, just me, the smell of coffee, and no more voicemails demanding explanations or apologies. The apartment was still, sunlight streaming through half-drawn curtains, dust floating like glitter in the air. I hadn't realized how beautiful silence could be until it was mine again. Some mornings I woke up early just to stand by the window and watch the city wake. Cars moved slowly through the streets. People bundled in coats, the world going on without me having to hold it together. For years, I had been living like a background character in someone else's story. Now I was the only author left. The first few weeks were strange. My hands still twitched every time I checked my banking app, expecting to see the familiar outgoing transfer. It took me a while to stop feeling guilty about keeping my own money. I started budgeting not out of fear, but out of curiosity. How much did it cost to live a life that was just mine? The answer was less than I thought, and more than I'd ever allowed myself to spend. One Friday evening, I walked past a florist on my way home and stopped. The shop smelled of eucalyptus and rainwater. Without thinking, I bought a bouquet of white lilies. They looked too elegant for my small kitchen, but I didn't care. I put them in an old glass jar and stared at them until it hit me I had never bought flowers for myself before. Saturday mornings became my favorite. I'd visit the farmer's market, chat with vendors, sample honey, and pick out fruit that wasn't on sale. I even joined a weekend art class, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. That's where I met Ethan. He was standing in front of an easel painting what looked like a sunset but felt like a memory. We started talking about colors. He said he preferred soft blues because they reminded him of calm after chaos. I laughed and told him I preferred gray because it didn't demand attention. He smiled. Maybe that's because you've been giving too much of yours away. We started meeting for coffee after class, then dinner, then long walks through the city. He never asked about my family, not right away, and I loved him for that. When I finally told him everything, the money, the manipulation, the night I left, he just listened. No pity, no advice, just quiet understanding. Sounds like you've been rebuilding your life one boundary at a time, he said. I smiled. Something like that. With time, the heaviness in my chest faded. Work felt easier. My creativity came back. I found myself volunteering for projects I would have once been too exhausted to handle. My boss noticed. You're different lately, she said one afternoon. Happier. I stopped living two lives, I said, before realizing how true that was. One Monday morning, I walked into her office and found out I'd been promoted director of strategy. The title didn't matter as much as what it represented: stability, independence, pride I didn't have to share or justify. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, cooked real food, and toasted to the woman I was finally becoming. A few weeks later, my phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. It had been months since we'd spoken. I hesitated before opening it. Mom says hi. She wanted me to tell you Dad's back home. He's better now. They've been staying with Aunt Margaret. Things are different. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, I'm glad he's okay. Her reply came a few minutes later. You should come visit. Mom wants to see you. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. That night I lay awake thinking about them. Not the angry, manipulative versions, but the quiet ones. The parents who used to read me bedtime stories, who made pancakes shaped like hearts on Valentine's Day, who once believed family meant something beyond money. I wanted to forgive them. I just didn't know if I could trust them. Days turned into weeks. Spring crept in, melting the last of the winter snow. I started walking to work instead of driving, just to feel the air on my face. Life felt smaller, simpler, but it was mine. Then one afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I saw Lydia's name flash across my phone again. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Hey, she said when I answered. Her voice was softer than I remembered. I just wanted to say thanks. For what? For not yelling at me that day, she said. You had every right to. I didn't know about the mortgage. I didn't know anything, really. I thought Mom and Dad were just managing. I didn't know what to say. You're welcome, I guess. I got a real job, she added quickly, as if she needed to prove herself. Full-time, marketing assistant at a local firm. It's not glamorous, but I pay my own bills. Something warm flickered in my chest. Good for you, Lydia. I mean it, Clara. I'm sorry. For all of it. For a moment I said nothing. Then I whispered, me too. When we hung up, I felt something inside me shift like a lock clicking open after years of being jammed. A week later, Ethan and I took a short trip to the coast. We walked along the sand, the wind whipping through our hair, the ocean stretching endlessly ahead. I told him about Lydia's call, about how strange forgiveness felt like holding something fragile that could break or bloom, depending on how gently you touched it. Maybe forgiveness isn't about them, he said, squeezing my hand. Maybe it's about letting yourself stop carrying their mistakes. The waves crashed against the rocks, and I knew he was right. When we returned, I found a card in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in Mom's familiar cursive. I opened it slowly. Clara, we're proud of you. We were wrong about so much. If you ever want to talk, we'll be here. Love, Mom and Dad. The words were simple, but they didn't feel manipulative this time. There were no conditions, no guilt, just an acknowledgement of truth. I placed the card on my bookshelf, next to the bouquet of dried lilies that had somehow lasted months. That evening, I lit a candle, sat by the window, and wrote in my journal again. Peace has a price, but it's worth every penny. I used to think forgiveness meant letting people back in. Maybe it just means letting go of the need to make them pay. Outside, the city lights flickered. Somewhere my family was rebuilding in their own way, just as I was rebuilding mine. Before I went to bed, I whispered into the dark, I hope they find peace too. And for the first time in a long time, I truly meant it. By the time summer arrived, the distance between us no longer felt like punishment. It felt like perspective, and that was when everything began to come full circle. 6 months after everything unraveled, I got a call from an unknown number. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to answer. Clara, the voice was faint, but unmistakable. Dad. Hi, I said carefully. I wanted to let you know we're switching to my employer's insurance next month, he said. You can remove us from your plan after that. For a moment, I didn't say anything. That's good news, I finally replied. It is, he said quietly. I just wanted to thank you for helping us through this, for everything, really. I could hear the emotion behind his words, rough and unfamiliar. Gratitude had never sounded like that before. You're welcome, Dad. He hesitated. Your mother and we've been talking a lot. About what we did. About how we lived. We got so used to you fixing everything that we forgot how to fix things ourselves. I'm sorry, Clara. We both are. I swallowed hard. Thank you for saying that. We'd like to see you sometime, he continued. No pressure, just dinner. We'd like to hear about your life, not your money, not your work. Just you. Maybe, I said softly. When things settle down. Fair enough, he said, relief in his tone. Take care, sweetheart. When I hung up, I sat in silence, phone still in my hand. For years, those calls had drained me, filled with guilt and demands. Now, for the first time, it ended in peace. 2 weeks later, I met them at a small diner near the river. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with warm light and old photos on the walls. When I walked in, Mom stood to hug me. She looked older, smaller, softer, somehow. Dad smiled, a tired but genuine smile. You look good, Mom said as we sat down. So do you, I replied, and for once it wasn't a lie. We ordered simple food, grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, no expensive wine or unnecessary show. Conversation came slowly at first, like testing the water after a long storm. But it grew easier. They told me about their new apartment. It's small, Mom said, but it's ours. Every bill paid. No pretending anymore. Dad nodded. I sleep better now than I did in that big house. There's something freeing about living within your means. I smiled. There is. When they asked about my job, I told them about the promotion, the projects, my team. They listened, really listened, without turning every success into a request. It was the first time in my life I felt like their daughter, not their safety net. Halfway through dinner, Lydia joined us. She looked different too, simpler clothes, no designer labels, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Hey, she said, awkwardly sliding into the seat beside me. Hey, I got a raise, she said, smiling a little. Nothing huge, but enough to move into my own place. I'm even taking night classes. That's great, Lydia, she nodded. I wouldn't have figured things out if you hadn't walked away. I hated you for it at first, but you were right. About everything. Her words hit harder than I expected. For a long time, I had imagined this moment, the apology, the recognition. But sitting there, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Forgiveness had already found me long before this dinner. We spent the rest of the evening talking about small things, movies, recipes, life. No tension, no guilt, just family, flawed and fragile but trying. When the check came, Dad reached for it automatically. I stopped him. Let me get it, I said. He shook his head. No, you've paid enough. And just like that, something inside me healed. After dinner, we stepped outside. The city lights shimmered on the river and the breeze carried the faint scent of spring. Lydia hugged me first. "You'll come by sometime, I will." Mom hugged me next, whispering, "We're proud of you, Clara. Not for what you gave, but for who you are." "Thanks, Mom." When I got home that night, I lit a candle, sat by the window, and opened my journal. I wrote about how strange peace feels, not loud or dramatic, just steady and warm like the sound of rain after thunder. I wrote about forgiveness not as surrender, but as release. And I wrote about how sometimes love doesn't mean holding on, it means letting go and trusting people to find their own way. Ethan came over later with takeout. "How was dinner?" he asked, setting down the bags. "Good," I said with a smile. "Better than I thought it would be." He poured 2 glasses of wine. "Closure." "Maybe not closure," I said, staring out at the city lights. "More like a new beginning." We ate quietly for a while. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. "You know, you've changed a lot since I met you." "I guess I finally stopped apologizing for being strong." He smiled. "You didn't stop being strong. You just stopped being everyone else's strength." Later, after he left, I stepped onto my balcony. The night air was cool, the city alive with distant laughter and the hum of life moving forward. I looked up at the stars faint through the haze and whispered, "Thank you." I wasn't sure who I was thanking, the universe, karma, or the version of myself who finally walked away that night at 2 a.m. Either way, she deserved it. That Christmas, exactly a year after everything had fallen apart, I woke up early, made pancakes, and watched the sunrise. No gifts, no chaos, no laughter that hurt. Just peace. I thought about the silver Rolls-Royce, the red bow, the cruel joke of those $2 socks. And then I thought about everything I'd gained since. A year ago, I'd left them a gift that changed everything. This year, the gift was mine: freedom, forgiveness, and the quiet certainty that I'd never lose myself again for anyone else's comfort. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people who should have cherished you most, tell me your story in the comments below. And if this one resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice, your strength, and your peace. Because sometimes walking away isn't the end, it's the beginning of who you were meant to be.